Hi everybody, this is Karen from Soterion, and you're listening to the SAP Security and GRC podcast with host Dudley Cartwright, the show for people who prioritize risk in the organization and want to go about by working smart and not hard. In today's episode, we'll be answering the following 3 questions. What do we mean by rule set customization? Why is it important? And how do you go about a rule set customization project? We'll be joined by industry experts Quintus Hougaard from Linkies Consulting and Emile Steyn from Soterion. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys, for joining today. If you can just give quick introductions. Quintus, starting with you.
Hi, I'm Quintus Hougaard. I'm from Linkies Managed Consulting. Been in the SAP audit space for about 30 odd years, and I've done quite a bit of rules of customization. So I feel, the lessons I've learned through many years, there's some value to add.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. Okay, Emile.
Yeah, thanks, Dudley. So I'm Emile Steyn. I'm the business unit director for Soterion in Europe, and as Quintus also said, that's quite a few rule set customizations over the years, and also with a background in auditing, which I think assists me with this process.
No, perfect. My name is Dudley Cartwright from Soterion. So I think, Quintus, you raise a very important point there that you've done a huge number of rule set customization projects. So you come with a wealth of experience. I think for both Emile and Quintus, you both have an audit background. So I think that definitely does help the facilitation process. Quintus, I think you have the added benefit of you were an SD functional consultant, a sales and distribution functional consultant. So you have a very good understanding of the order to cash process. So I've seen you do those rule set customization workshops, and it is something that you do very, very well. Likewise with Emile. So maybe just to start, can you maybe just explain what we mean by rule set customization?
Yeah, interesting to start with a question like that, because I know when you get to various clients, a lot of clients always say they're unique. When you get to the authorization process, everybody say they're unique, and you tend to think, everybody tell you unique, but there's a lot of things that's similar. But yet, when it comes to the rule set customization process, there are definitely one size doesn't fit all. So for me, the process of to summarize what you mean by a rule set customization project, you just take something generic, and obviously, hopefully, starting with a good base, be that the SAP GRC or the Soterion rule set or what, and then make that your own. So it's something that from a one size fit all to fit you, the customer per se, because there it is true for me when it gets to rule set customizations, there's definitely uniqueness in each of a customer. And we need to tailor-make a rule set to make it more focused and to actually let the customer own that rule set. So it's coming from a generic rule set to customize it into a client-specific rule set. That's a high-level definition for me, what is meant by that.
So maybe then, Quintus, to summarize, are we saying then that it's the vendors and the audit firms have very sort of standard out-the-box rule set intended for all industries, all organizations? So the process of customizing the rule set is just tailoring it to be more unique or more specific to your organization, identifying risks that are relevant to your business, and also removing risks that are in the out-the-box or standard rule set that's not relevant to your organization.
Exactly, Daddy. And I think for me there, it's to really cut out false positives, risks that it's true, but it's not relevant to you. And also to obviously include risks that many of the generic rule set doesn't have, especially if you're going to new business cycles. A lot of the business cycles, for example, the rule sets, for example, won't cover the oil industry, the IH solutions, and to customize those specifically to the client's needs. So yes, what you're saying is correct, is to filter out what is not applicable, but also to bring in what is applicable. So from a generic rule set to make it the client-specific one, and that that makes a focus rule set.
Yeah. It just is unfortunate that they use the word or the term customization, because don't you think that makes it feel like it's a very technical, complex activity? It almost should just be, it's just tailoring the out-the-box rule set to be more relevant. It is unfortunate that the word customization goes with it, because it does make it feel like it's a much bigger exercise, a much more technical exercise than it really is.
Actually, bring that up. One of the last clients we were at, the project manager actually asked us not to use the word customization, specifically for that reason. They said, no, don't use that word, because we're now thinking, you're going to go into the you're going to start customizing the SAP system. So it's funny that you bring that up, because it is correct. It is adapting the business process, bringing it in. It's not really customizing. It is tailor-making it.
No, perfect. Okay, so moving on to the second question, and Emile, maybe you can give us some input here. So just why is it important? What are the benefits of doing it, and what's the value of for an organization to carry out, or to perform a rule set customization exercise?
Yeah, I think it's important to maybe just take a step back and understand where that rule set is actually used. It's used in so many of the access request type of an access management type of activities, like user access request management and user access reviews, that a company that hasn't gone through that customization process, they're not getting full value from their GRC solution. So, and also along with that goes a lot of loss in efficiencies. So the amount of effort that gets spent in reviewing risks that's not applicable to a specific company, there's so much lost effort, and also that a lot of the risks that is important kind of gets lost in the process, because it's mixed between a lot of those items that's not really applicable.
I think, again, another good point there, where you said there's a lot of effort wasted on the sort of less important risks. And I guess also that has an impact on business buy-in, because I'm assuming then if the business feel that the rule set is inappropriate and we're monitoring risks that's not relevant, it's difficult for business to buy into the process and to get business accountability. So, you would assume then that, one of the benefits of that rule set customization is not only that the organization start monitoring risk that's relevant to the organization, but it does also hopefully enhance business accountability, business buy-in, because the business users feel that the risks being monitored are real risks to the organization.
Yeah, 100%. And sorry, Quintus, just to touch back on almost the effort spent on that, and there's also a lot of that effort is spent on false positives. So where the rule set, after customizing a rule set, that those false positives will typically be eliminated. So to get rid of that has a great benefit for a reviewer, that he know what they are seeing in either reviewing an access request or a user access review is really of concern to them.
Yeah, no. Quintus, sorry, did you want to add something there?
Yes, I think, Emile, you were a good point you brought up there in terms of the rules that are being used in so many down the line in the processes. So having an effective and efficient and a focused rule set, and I like always bringing the less is more in there, bring that trying to get the guys in the workshop to focus on it. But you mentioned also point designing controls for risks, that's not applicable. You talked about the recertification process, that focusing on then. So everything down the line becomes more effective and efficient by focusing and getting a customized, a client-specific rule set. And Dudley, you brought that point up about, the ownership. I really find that a risk rule set customization project is the best way of moving that risk ownership from the IT into the business. And that Emile was also talking about, where you bring this visibility to and people can see and then decide what's important. That is really, for me, one of the real big benefits in this process.
Yeah. No, I agree. Listen, I think we'll cover that a little bit in the next question with that, but I agree. We've just seen for those companies that have done that rule set customization, just the business users have been educated on the risks that are relevant to their area of the business, and just the ownership and accountability once they understand the risk and it's been explained to them, it's been articulated to them. There's just a completely different level of ownership and accountability once they understand the risk, and that usually happens after those rule set projects. Yeah. Moving on then to ask the question, how would you generally go about doing these projects, doing a rule set customization project? Quintus, maybe you want to go?
Yes, obviously one will have to start with a good base. That helps a lot. If you start with you don't want to reinvent the wheel from scratch. So starting off with a very good base helps a lot and give you a
and so that will be like a vendor's out-the-box rule set or the audit firm's rule set. So take an out-the-box rule set as a starting point rather than trying to begin with a blank canvas.
Yes. So if you start with the out-the-box rule set from a vendor, and then using that as your baseline, but then obviously bring in your audit findings of your previous audit findings to make sure that one of the objectives obviously will be to make sure that you are measured with the same yardstick during the year than what you expect the auditors is going to measure you at the end. The last workshop we're busy with now at the moment, we have actually one of the big audit firms sitting in the workshops, and we have the benefit of, for the client, that we're making sure that that we align the rule set for knowing what they're going to check. So to start off, start with a good generic rule set, bring in your previous audit findings, do an analysis based on that risk rule set that you have, because that brings in the visibility. Because a lot of the time, we try to get the clients not to immediately go into the results of the risk, where those risks are breached, because we try to give them backlist and is this risk important. But by making that the assessment with the generic rule set, it does help the business and the process owners to understand, okay, but why does people have that? So you do the assessment, and then of course, if you can give your participants in the workshops, after separating them by business process, and if you can give them some prep work before they join the workshops, for example, focus on their risks, but also get their Z transactions to them, that they can have a bit of a understanding, and perhaps send them a bit of results. That will help a lot in cutting down that workshop time, but also increase the participation a lot, because you really want them to join and get them on your side as soon as possible so they can take that ownership.
So you mentioned workshop there. So Emile, the rule set projects that you've done, I'm guessing also very workshop based. And then I'm assuming that when you're covering a particular area of the rule set, say procure to pay, you're just inviting the relevant parties in there, which will traditionally be your accounts payable and your procurement or inventory. And just that, I guess the right people are in the room for those set of risks, that they don't spend hours listening to risks that are associated with a completely different sort of process and not relevant to them.
Yeah, Dudley, you are correct, but I think that almost, if I could add on to Quintus's answer, almost the starting point for me, that is the buy-in of the correct people before the process starts, so that you need to have buy-in from the senior management, that you actually get the correct people in the room when making those decisions. Because I'd say the worst workshops that I've ever had was where it was people from the correct functional area, but they weren't people in a position to make decisions on whether it was actually appropriate for the company. And I'd say that's possibly for me the most important.
So in a perfect world, what type of people would you want in the workshop? I'm assuming you would like some of the functional the functional analysts, business analysts. You would like a few key users or super users that understand the process. Internal audits, you'd want them to sit on that. If you've got the luxury of having external audit also sitting in on some of those, there could be value. Is there anyone else that you can think of that should also be included in these workshops?
Yeah, I'd maybe just add the business process owner, a decision maker from the business side. So that's very important, that it doesn't become too much of a technical discussion at that stage, where it's just focused on the technical consultants. The technical consultants provide a lot of guidance in that process, but the ultimate decision remains with the business.
Emile, your point there is that business process owner, ultimately, if you can get that person to become the risk owner, so you want that risk owner there, the person who is empowered to make that accountable for that. So definitely, so it helps also educating that business process owner to become the risk owner, because it's a journey that you try to get him to become the risk owner, knowing and understanding that it's his information that's at risk here, and he need to make sure that I protect my information by making sure I cover cover all those angles there.
Yeah, and Quintus, we mentioned a little bit about the business education aspect of a rule set customization project, and I guess one part is yes, as you go through every single segregation of GT risk or every access risk, it's debated, it's discussed. There's a very good understanding of how fraud could potentially be, committed with that combination. So there's that part of the education. But I guess also there's the other aspect of the education where you start defining some sort of policies around some of the risks. As an example, I've seen in some of your projects before, you've agreed with the client to say, listen, so if we deem a certain risk as a critical risk, are we saying that no one in the business is allowed it? Therefore, it needs to be remediated. If it's a high risk, people can have it, but there needs to be a mitigating control in place. If it's a medium risk, people can have it. There doesn't need to be a mitigating control in place. So just as an example, that are the type of discussions that come out of these workshops. And surely those prove quite valuable to the business owners, because it creates this sort of standard operating procedure going forward for when a risk lands in their inbox. What is the decision they're allowed to make? Are they allowed to prove it, or should they be rejecting it? And I think, that's some of the other aspects, not only educating the business users on what the SOD risks mean, but also what are the rules that surround or govern each of the risks based on the risk level.
That's very true, because obviously we start off by, if you look at how these risks are, the out-the-box risk rule sets are gratings. It's established versus based on the impact versus likelihood, and that's how we get to our risk ratings. However, when I get to the workshops, exactly what you're saying now, obviously, and that's where that's part of the customization process, because the impact in the retail industry for one sales order going wrong versus the impact in the oil industry for one oil sales order going wrong is huge. Okay, difference. So that will have difference on your likelihood and your impact. But I like bringing it back to bring the process improvements in the place. If you have those rules and say, listen, like the last one we did, there's some people having access from complete different areas that they should not access, completely not having access to. So although the impact and likelihood is reduced, we still went and make that risk critical, purely because what we put in place, the client then is saying, listen, if this request is simulated, and the requester who simulated picks up a critical risk, they stop the bus right there. It doesn't even waste the time of the business process owner, and goes back to say, listen, sorry, you can't have this risk. So it's a bit of a conflict between impact versus likelihood, and also doing the business process improvement process by doing that. But I prefer the latter. Obviously, if we can't downgrade a risk, and we have to align with what the auditors are saying. But a lot of the time, we bring that critical risk in exactly what you're saying. We don't want critical risk to be, if people need to breach a critical risk, they use a firefighter or the elevator ride solution for that.
So far, we've spoken about the process around rule set customization. And Emile, we've discussed before that, the surveys we've conducted, we only feel that, 50% of organizations have performed the rule set customization process. So for those companies that have performed the rule set customization, what's your advice there with how do you ensure that rule set stays relevant going forward? Because it is a little bit of a common mistake. We feel that companies go through the rule set customization exercise, and they almost then think that rule set is complete and it never needs to be looked at again, which is possibly, there's some shortcomings to that way of thinking. So any thoughts on how does an organization ensure that rule set stays relevant going forward?
Yes. what I'll suggest for any company that has gone through that process, I think what you want to avoid is now losing all of the work that has gone into that rule set. So there needs to be a review process of that rule set, and also especially for companies that are new to that, is just do it once a year. Just make sure the risks are relevant, and that although that will only happen once a year, to also supplement that with a process where any new customization is introduced in the system, that is reviewed for introduction into the rule set at that stage. Yeah. So whether that's Z transactions, Z programs, Fiori applications, when that gets introduced, that it's reviewed for inclusion in the rule set, that you don't at year end now need to basically review a whole year of customization.
Yeah. And that seems to be quite a gap for most organizations as they create custom transaction codes, custom Fiori apps, etc. There's just not a process in place to say, should this new functionality be included in the rule set? Is it performing something very similar to a SAP standard transaction code, etc.? So that is a bit of a gap in most organizations, ensuring that new custom T codes, Fiori apps, etc. are considered to be included with that. But you also raise a good point there. Obviously, introducing the annual review of the rule set, that at least once a year, just spend a bit of time looking at the rule set. Are all those risks still relevant? Are you still comfortable with the risk levels of each of those risks, etc.? So yeah, I think that's obviously very good advice.
Dudley, what I maybe can add there, like you're saying, most of if it's any customization process go through, most clients have a very good CAB meeting, a change control board that will approve changes going through, and it's a testing and everything, before it migrate through. But there's a huge gap there. None of those two things that I found, it's a gap. The one is going about if a Z program or ticket goes in, the focus is this functionality working as the spec? Yes, it is, and they test and that's good. The gap there is, like you say, there's no checkpoint, and this is one of the processes changes we bring in after rule set. We say, listen, change your change control process, but if this program or this app goes in, do that question, a tick box, does it goes into the risk rule set, and for what does it do? And secondly, if there's any authorization checks being built into this program, have your use OBD table, your auth check table being built up, because we use those auth check values also in the rule set. So we've always found that missing in the change control process when we get to clients. Most of the clients actually have a blind spot when it gets to there, and this get discovered, during the process. For me, the other thing that I always also like is when we get to clients, they're always surprised, and of course one of the things that we struggle with when we get to a client, we see, there's 1,000 Z transactions we have to consider in this process. Is it going to be a long process? And then you see, okay, of the 1,000, only 300 is being used. There's 700 redundant ZT codes and programs lying in there. So another benefit for me coming through during this process we discovered is that there's all these data migration Z programs and T codes has been lying there, and they're very dangerous transactions because they're mass upload transactions. You can cause a lot of hassles with them, and they're not locked. They're lying there, and some of these programs are Z staff or T codes, and these guys can use them. So for me, another thing going through this process is identifying that redundant programs and Z transactions is lying there,
and getting rid of them,
and then get rid of them, lock them, and that is really another added benefit. Also, obviously, through this process, you also, unfortunately, or fortunately for is that we focus on the bad role design, because suddenly we see all these risks at the role level, never mind at the user level, and then brings us back to, hold on, the current client is now realizing, hold on, I can't, fix, putting plasters on this solution anymore. This rule set project has now showed me, listen, my rule sets, my roles actually need some attention. Another one's discovered as you go through this process.
Yeah. No, perfect. Okay, so maybe then to summarize, so the key takeaways with this process. Okay, so Emile, you mentioned one, have the correct people in the workshops. Okay, critical for the success of the project, having the right people in the workshops, in the room, making the decisions. The one takeaway that we haven't discussed, but I feel we would all be in agreement with it, is less is more in this space. Rather get a company to manage 50 risks effectively rather than trying to manage 300 risks ineffectively. So I think we've seen with our clients, companies that have got more cut down rule sets and do a better job with that smaller rule set compared to those organizations that's trying to manage these huge rule sets. Any other key takeaways that you'd like to add?
Just think ownership of risks in general, and the improvements of that. Maybe as it's a small side benefit, but so especially in the access request process, to have risk owners become part of that process, where historically I think companies stick to line managers. To have the risk owners actually become part of that process, I think has a massive improvement.
Yeah, no, true.
And for me, a takeaway also is I get to clients to be sensitive towards certain business processes that is historically more risk aware than other business processes. So your areas like the procure to pay, your HR and finance, those guys have risk on their mind. But when you do these workshops, be sensitive to the guys like the sales guys and the manufacturing guys, the production guys. For them, risk is not daily on their on that platter. So just bring them also in and make sure that you consider all of them also, because a lot of money normally is spent through like the plant maintenance process especially at mining industry and stuff, but that's captured within the procure to pay process. So just make so be sensitive towards that you really including all the business process and understanding where they are. So that's one of the things I always try to push at the end, also to make sure that everybody has there's risk all over the business, not just in one area. There are people who accept it more, and there's people that need a bit more push and a bit more nurturing to get to that point.
No, definitely. And I suppose Quintus, now you've just made me think of something that a huge area from a rule set perspective that we haven't even discussed is, on the data privacy side. So traditionally the rule set projects has all been around segregation of duties and critical transactions, but very few companies are defining data privacy rule sets, and I guess that's something that does need to be included as part of this exercise.
Definitely. We tried to do that in the sensitive, on the HR side. Obviously, that's more evident, and also in the vendor data, and customer master data, where previously you'll see that displaying access to a vendor master wasn't sensitive. And if you do that risk, suddenly you see, oh, shucks, that's lying in like a, everybody in finance can see vendor master data, and that's not necessary anymore. But in the old days, the privacy by design wasn't there. So that highlights once again that issue also.
Yeah. No, perfect. Good. Okay, guys. Well, I think that will wrap up this podcast. Thank you for sharing your views. To people who've got a wealth of experience in this space. So thank you for that. And we look forward to the next podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.